muted. I am indeed unmuted. Thank you for your patience. I come to you from a backyard in Bronzeville in Chicago today. I got out of the district to go to a few meetings. Thank you. We're about 12 minutes late, but we're going to get going. So I am Lindsay LaPointe, the state representative of the 19th House District, which for those of you who don't know, that's the far northwest side of Chicago and some of the suburbs. I am really excited to have everyone with us for this event today. And yes, we are going to archive it. It'll be archived on Facebook Live, but also on my official government website, which is replapointe.com. So plenty of ways to share with your friends and go back and acclimate yourself to the details. We are here to talk about supported decision making, and we have three really amazing people who are going to contribute to this event today, who I'll introduce shortly, but I do want to provide a little bit of background. So I myself have been the state rep for just over a year, and I am a state rep because I was inspired to be here by the 9 years I spent in social work. I have worked in a group home for kids with special needs. I've worked as a one-on-one aide to a boy with autism, and those are experiences that I carry with me every day as a state rep, and it really inspires me to make the changes that children and families and young adults and adults need. My ultimate goal is to create more opportunities for people. And shortly after I became rep, I connected with Vaughn Occupational High School, which is in Portage Park, and Wright College, which is right at the corner of Montrose and Narragansett in Chicago. It's a city college. And I consider both of those entities big community assets. And they both do work that create more opportunities for people, young people, and adults. And as the state rep, I'm very thankful for the partnerships that my office has with Vaughn and with Wright College. I know President Dave Potash from Wright College is participating in the event today, and Principal McNally from Vaughn High School, I believe, is tuning in. You have done, and I know that you'll continue to do the critical work that's in front of us to create more opportunities for young people who have disabilities after high school. So this conversation is a part of that work. We are doing this event today to both share information about supported decision making in general and the specific bill that we have pending in Springfield, but also to invite you into the process. I assume and I hope that there are families of young people with disabilities on this virtual event, parents from Vaughn High School, and in my opinion, you are the most affected by these types of policies. So our big goals are for you to know about this bill related to supported decision making. We want to give you an opportunity to share feedback on the bill because it's not done yet, it's a process. And we want to give you an opportunity to advocate for it and tell you what's next, what might we work on next. So just briefly, we're going to get into the details of what this is, but for kind of a simple starting point, supported decision making recognizes a need for a less restrictive alternative to guardianship for adults with disabilities who need assistance with making decisions of daily living. So that's what we're going to talk about. We are going to hear from two wonderful staff people from the Guardianship and Advocacy Commission, which is a state entity, and the president of the local school council at Vaughn Occupational High School. So I'm going to share a little bit about these three women and then hand it over to Cindy Fa-Oki. So Gia Orr is from the Guardianship and Advocacy Commission. She's the director of community relations. More importantly, she's a mother. She is a former teacher, she's a former principal, and she's currently on the local school council at the Chicago High School for Agricultural Sciences. She joins us from Chicago. Teresa Parks is the deputy director at the state agency, and Teresa is joining us from a small town outside of Peoria, which I think is very cool. And she is a parent and co-guardian of a young person with a disability. And then Cindy Faoki is a parent of 2 children, both with disabilities. She is a guardian to one and a co-guardian to another. So we couldn't have better people to talk about this issue. And as I hand it over to Cindy, I will share that when I first met Cindy at Vaughn High School, when I went in to meet with some parents and meet with the local school council, the passion that she has for children and creating more opportunities for people with disabilities, and her warmth and her thoughtfulness and her leadership on the LSC just emanated off from her and made me want to do everything I could to partner with her. So that's Cindy, and I know that we will all enjoy hearing from her. And just so you know the run of the show, Cindy's going to talk a little bit about this issue and why it's really important, and then we're going to hear from Gia and Teresa about the Guardianship and Advocacy Commission and this bill in particular. And then, of course, we will have questions and discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Cindy.
Hello. Thank you so much for such a kind introduction, and I'm really grateful to be part of such a fine group of people who are helping so many of our families and young adults with disabilities. You know, I want to say that a lot of these, there are so many laws that take care of our students, our children, whether your child is born with a disability or is diagnosed with a disability sometime between the age of 1 and 21. We have IDEA that helps us with the schools, and that's really very complicated. And it's very difficult for parents to navigate that. And then now the laws that, especially here in Illinois, that govern the students that, or the adults, young adults, are also very complicated. And I have to say that my first daughter was born prematurely, and she has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, intellectual disabilities, and some other minor ones. But when she was very young, I wasn't thinking ahead that I need to protect her under the law. And I should also say that my youngest, she's still in high school. She's what we call a super senior at Vaughn High School, and she has an autism diagnosis with a couple of other diagnoses. But it was very different getting guardianship or co-guardianship for my daughters. And one of the reasons that I knew that I should look ahead to gaining guardianship for my daughters was when I was working at the Parent Training and Information here in Chicago. I was working at the Family Resource Center on Disabilities, and sometimes we did get calls, or we did trainings in our office or offsite for parents who were looking into getting good guardianship or protection for their children. One of the challenges, and I can only speak for my daughter, and especially in Cook County, but because my eldest daughter, she is verbal, and she has some speech issues. So the judges are not trained in working with people with disabilities. So they have to rely on the doctors and sometimes ad litem attorneys to help them to make a judgment for guardianship. So in the case of my daughter, Elise, a volunteer legal service assigned or they were assigned as an ad litem attorney, and they came to our home. They interviewed me, they interviewed my daughter, and the attorney made the report that said, yes, this person is a candidate for guardianship. And and we were very confident with that decision when she was 18, or after she had turned 18. But since then, now she's 25, and she has gained many, many skills that we didn't know she would get after turning age 18. And it was a little bit unsettling, because we know that guardianship, you can make changes to it, but it did seem a bit extreme. And for my other daughter with autism, it was more open and shut case, because she has very little language, and she does need the more support. So I feel very confident with getting plenary guardianship for my youngest. Now, for many of my friends who have young adults with disabilities, there are so many gray areas, and we don't want to stifle what could potentially be a higher functioning adult with more freedoms. And so we have these two extremes, either guardianship or power of attorney. And we do need something that's more, a la carte, perhaps, or it's the adults with disabilities and their parents and other caregivers can be more informed to decide what kind of level of support they need. So I'm so glad that the Illinois Guardianship Commission has come to Representative LaPointe to help parents to make better informed decisions going further. And I thank you all for your time. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. You did a terrific job of painting a picture of why and how parents need more choices, and young people need more choices. I am going to turn it over to either Gia or Teresa. And if you need me to start screen sharing, just give me the signal.
I will go ahead and get started then. It's an honor and a privilege to be a part of your meeting today and to share information, not only about the legislation, but about our agency as well. We, as Representative LaPointe mentioned, we are a state agency, and I believe we're going to have a few PowerPoint slides here to share in just a moment, but I echo what Cindy was saying about having options for our children, individualized options that best meet their needs. And we need to have a range of options. And for the longest time, guardianship was such a significant and really the only option for many of our kids. So it's exciting to offer up the possibility of a new, more individualized option. So if we could have the PowerPoint.
All right, I think I just enabled screen sharing. Thanks everyone for bearing with us all as we're all getting used to these new kinds of events.
I think we're all learning. It's a learning process. Can you still hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I I feel like I'm still being connected all of a sudden. Is the PowerPoint up?
Hold on just a moment. One technical difficulty. Just a moment, please.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, can we all see the PowerPoint?
I can see it. Okay, why don't I go ahead and get started? What I hope to do today is share information about the legislation, but I first want to start out by just giving you a brief overview of our agency, because it is a resource for persons with disabilities and their families. As Representative LaPointe stated, we are a state agency. We're a little bit different in that we have a board of commissioners at the top of the agency who are appointed by the governor, and they come to us with human service or disability related experience. All of our services pertain to persons with disabilities, and we have offices across the state, an administrative office in Chicago, one in Springfield, and then various regional office, 7 in all across the state. So every county should have access to one of our Guardianship and Advocacy Commission regional offices. We have 3 primary programs. As demonstrated in the next slide, the Office of State Guardian, that's our largest program. We serve as guardian of last resort for adults with disabilities age 18 or older. We are guardian for more than 5,000 individuals across the state of Illinois. We also have a legal advocacy service. And in that program, we provide legal advice and representation for both children and adults with disabilities. We are staffed in that program primarily by attorneys, and they often are representing individuals with mental health needs who are facing involuntary mental health hearings, treatment hearings, as well as commitment hearings. Our attorneys represent those individuals to make sure that they get their day in court. Then we have the third program, the Human Rights Authority. And in that program, we investigate disability rights violations committed against persons with disabilities by disability service providers. I'd like to give you a little bit more detail about how each of these programs could be a resource to you. First of all, the Office of State Guardian is a resource in a variety of ways. Next slide, please. It is a resource for situations in which an individual reaches age 18 or older and might need a guardian due to decisional incapacity when there's no one willing, able, or appropriate to serve as guardian. The court may consider our Office of State Guardian to be a resource for those situations. Most often, we are appointed guardian, the state is appointed guardian for adults when individuals under the care of DCFS are aging out, they're turning 18, and DCFS still feels that they need a guardianship or assistance with decision making. So DCFS will have us appointed guardian. In other situations, an individual might end up in the hospital, say in the hospital emergency room, and they're incapacitated and can't give consent for medical care. So what happens often is that a hospital attorney will get involved and they will have us appoint a guardian if they can't find any family or surrogate decision maker to stand in and help that individual with decision making. We also get appointed guardian in situations where a current guardian or the person with disability is in a dangerous situation, abuse or neglect situation. The Adult Protective Services agencies will seek us out and petition to have us, the state, appointed guardian. Those are the most frequent types of appointments that we encounter for guardianship appointment. But we're also a resource in other ways as well. We have a lot of knowledge about adult guardianship laws here in Illinois. We're a resource. We have a toll-free intake line. We also have a website that has information, excuse me, about guardianship. We have a guide to adult guardianship in Illinois. We have some informational sheets that are available on that website. And also on the website, if you are a guardian or you're looking at being appointed guardian, we have a guardian training module on the website that people can take, and it gives information about your role, your responsibilities, your limitations, and there's no cost for it. It's readily available. And in fact, a couple of years ago, we were behind legislation to require guardian training for newly appointed guardians outside of Cook County, unless the court waives that. So we are the providers of that guardian education requirement. Also, the second program I mentioned, the Legal Advocacy Service, can also be a resource. Next slide, please. It can be a resource for providing information about mental health rights through our toll-free intake line. And if you have a family member who is receiving mental health services, say inpatient on a hospital psychiatric unit, our attorneys may be a resource, may be the entity that represents those individuals in involuntary mental health proceedings. Also, if you have questions about special education rights, we are starting a new initiative, a joint effort between our Legal Advocacy Service and our Human Rights Authority to provide an advocacy resource for students and families in the special education world. Now, that initiative is just starting, and we're still in the process of staffing it. But if you have questions about it, Laura Hart in our Peoria office is a resource. Also, if you know of someone who might be interested in establishing an advance directive regarding mental health treatment, our attorneys in the Legal Advocacy Service are a resource to help individuals complete the mental health treatment declaration forms, again, a form of an advance directive to guide care when someone's in a mental health crisis, and to have a surrogate appointed in those times of need. And finally, we are a resource for children who are under DCFS care who are in a mental health facility. Our attorneys can provide legal advice and assistance. Finally, our Human Rights Authority can also be a resource to you if you have concerns about disability rights associated with disability service provision. And here are just some examples of the type of entities that we would investigate. And please know that this is not an exhaustive list, but we have investigated special education programs, hospital psychiatric units, community providers, mental health, and as well as developmental disability programs, group homes, SILAs, community integrated living arrangements, vocational programs, state operated facilities, and we even go into jails and juvenile detention centers if there's a need or an issue there. And here are also some examples of rights issues we investigate: forced medication, inadequate treatment or services, restrictions of communications or visitation, confidentiality violations, admission, transfer, and discharge violations. Again, not in an exhaustive list. But one thing I want to let you know about is how to file a Human Rights Authority complaint. And just to let you know, anyone can file a complaint. It doesn't have to be the person with a disability or the guardian, anyone. And we accept anonymous complaints as well. We do protect the identity of the complainant as well as the individual with disabilities. The complaint can be filed just by contacting our regional offices, by contacting our intake line. We also have an online complaint mechanism through our website. You can come to one of our meetings. You can send us a complaint in the mail. And what happens is we have regional panels of Human Rights Authority members who actually review the complaints, accept them for investigations, and conduct the investigations with the assistance of a staff person, a Human Rights Authority coordinator. We have 9 regional panels across the state, and each panel has 9 members on it, very regional, grassroots based. And these are the individuals who evaluate and advocate for disability rights protections in their area of the state. The next slide just has our basic contact information. I don't know if this would be available after the presentation, but there's our toll-free intake line and TTY website, and then our regional office contacts for our Human Rights Authority complaints. One more thing I have to tell you about the Human Rights Authority before we talk about the legislation, and this is my commercial plug. If you or someone you know might be interested in serving on our Human Rights Authority panels, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. There's an application and an appointment process, and our regional panels are by and large made up of service consumers, family members, guardians of service recipients, concerned citizens, and also we do have provider representatives on each of the panels as well. And this is a way to share your experiences and expertise to improve disability rights protections in the area where you live. So we encourage your involvement. We'd love to hear from you. It is a volunteer role, but we do provide you with training and we do reimburse you for expenses. Okay, so besides our 3 programs, we do have a legislative role. Under our mandates, we can recommend legislation. And this usually happens when through our work and each of our programs, we identify gaps in services, we identify patterns of problems that don't seem to be easily resolved, that need some kind of systemic resolution. And so in those cases, we look at pursuing some legislation. And here are just a few examples of past legislation we've been involved in. In the past year, we were involved in legislation that was passed regarding a requirement that adult disability service providers evaluate and offer sex education to the clients that they serve, because we saw some gaps in this area. We also were involved in legislation to permit residents of group homes to have access to cameras in their rooms if there was a safety, abuse, or neglect concern. And that's something that mirrors what's available in nursing homes. We wanted to make it available to residents of group homes. And then also we were involved in legislation to develop a task force to examine how persons with disabilities interface with the criminal justice system. And that task force is now in operation. But this year, we're very excited about House Bill 4842, which is called the Supported Decision Making Agreement Act, sponsored by Representative LaPointe. And again, as the representative mentioned, this is to recognize a less restrictive alternative to guardianship for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities who need assistance with decisions of daily living. Let me give you a little bit of background about the bill and how it came to be recommended. Of course, we have years of experience in guardianship law within Illinois, and also with advanced directives. And then we were behind the legislation that passed the Mental Health Treatment Declaration Act, which is the advanced directive I mentioned earlier that allows persons with mental health needs to identify a surrogate decision maker when they are in mental health crisis. And then through our guardianship work, we were becoming increasingly aware of individuals, particularly persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities, who had guardianship appointments over them that may have been more restrictive than they really needed. And then on our advocacy side of our agency, we became aware of situations in which persons were seeking an alternative means of than guardianship, something less restrictive than the confines of guardianship. In fact, we were encountering parents just like Cindy who were coming to us and saying, you know, my child with disability turned 18, and the special ed programs are saying, you know, this is the time you start thinking about guardianship. But the parents were like, I'm not sure that's a right choice for my child. I know they need a little bit of help here and there, but I don't know that I want to take my own child to court and have a guardian appointed. And so it became more clear to us that there needed to be another option. So we started doing the research, and we found that there are states across the country that have initiated a supported decision-making model to assist situations like this. So we felt that in order to really make this happen, we needed to see it in legislation to have some guidelines around this particular concept. So hence, Representative LaPointe was gracious enough to listen to us and sponsor this legislation. So let me give you a little bit of information about the key components of the legislation. It starts out with some guiding principles, and key to those guiding principles are individual choice of the person with disability based on their own beliefs, their own belief system. It's you know, that remains intact. There's also a statement in the proposal about the presumption of capability and capacity to maintain their own decision-making ability. So the decision, the ultimate decision, still remains with the person with the disability. However, they can identify a supporter, just like a surrogate in a power of attorney or a mental health declaration, someone who can be there and help them evaluate and analyze information needed to make a decision. The bill also includes supporter disqualification, so that not just anyone can be a supporter, not someone off the street, but someone that is appropriate, doesn't have a criminal background, doesn't have a conflict of interest. So those are outlined in the bill as well. The bill outlines the supporter's authority, their role, prohibitions, and mostly what they're asked to do is just help that individual collect information, evaluate information, and if needed, help the individual communicate their decision to the health provider or whoever serving the individual. We also have a sample agreement, a supported decision-making agreement actually built into the legislation, just like power of attorney laws often have a power of attorney form built into the legislation. Same with this. We've provided a sample that people can use, and it allows the individual with disabilities to identify the areas of support that they might need, whether it be health care or applying for public benefits, or help with finding a residence, or help with vocational or work pursuits. Those are just a few of the examples. The law also includes abuse and neglect reporting requirements here in Illinois, mandated reporting requirements, and then it concludes with the revocation process for ending the agreement by either the supporter or the person with disability in case things don't work out. In terms of the current status of the bill, it's been filed. We've developed a fact sheet that's available for anyone who's interested. We are in the process of contacting legislators and educating them on the proposal and on the concept of supported decision-making. We're reaching out to people as stakeholders like you. We have reached out and been interacting with the Office of Public Guardian in Cook County, as well as the National Elder Law Attorneys. All of both of which are very interested. So the version that's available now may be modified over time as we get feedback from everybody. And we hope that this will be pursued in the spring session of 2021. So that's very much a nutshell presentation about the legislation and our agency. But I'm going to stop now and see if Representative LaPointe wants to say anything more about the legislation or the proposal and her work on it.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I will say a few things. First of all, part of what we do is in the legislature is read bills. And I refreshed myself and reread this one recently. And one of the things I really like about this bill, and the current version is only 13 pages long, so it won't take you long to read it, is it's very clear and thoughtful about the why of the bill and the basic principles behind the bill. So the whole idea of creating a structure that's least restrictive is very front and center when you read this bill. The whole idea is to give people and families more choices, and it recognizes the reality that people change and people grow and people build their capacity. And Cindy made that great point at the beginning that where somebody's at age 18 when parents are starting these conversations might be different. That's reality from where somebody is at age 25. So I'm very excited about this bill. So that's what I'll say for now.
Thank you very much. And I guess the floor is open for anyone who might have any questions. I don't know what our time limit is here, but certainly, and if you don't have questions right now, or if you think of anything afterwards, we're a phone call, an email away, and we have included our contact information on the last slide. But if anyone has any thoughts, questions about concerns even about the legislation that we can address, recommendations regarding the bill, questions about our programs, our agency, we're certainly a resource. Gia, did you have any comments, anything you would want to add?
I can get us going with a question. To me, a really important thing in this whole discussion, which is something I'm always thinking about when we're discussing legislation, is what are other states doing? And one of the things you mentioned is that this supported decision making is a structure that other states have utilized. So what would you, or currently utilize, what would you say are some of the best practices or things that we've learned from other states that have informed this legislation?
Well, that's an excellent point. There is actually a National Center on Supported Decision Making, and we reached out to them as we were crafting the language for this legislation to get feedback and ideas. And a couple of things came through, like the presumption of capability. That was something that was huge in most of the bills that we saw across the country. They had some kind of statement to that effect, as well as kind of more clearly defining the role and limits of the supporter, which we also tried to build into our legislation. In fact, you will see we took copies of some of the best bills in other parts of the country and tried to combine and pull out what we thought would best meet the needs here in Illinois. So there is, you will see some parity with some of the other states in terms of some of the language. Now, some states do not agree that a prescribed agreement form should be in the legislative proposal, but most states already have that in place. We felt, based on our experience with guardianship and with advanced directives, and here in Illinois, most of the advanced directives have prescribed forms, that we thought we should include that in this proposal as well. Although there is a statement, it says there's the option of having something similar to. It doesn't have to be that exact form, but have some of the same components. So those were some of the things that came up. We also heard from the state of Alaska, which had a very high rate of guardianship appointments at age 18 for students with disabilities. It was almost like 90%. It was very high. And they have made a concerted effort to try to change that. And in fact, they're using the supported decision-making model to help people ease out of guardianship, so that it's almost a vehicle to have the guardianship revoked in favor of a supported decision agreement. So that might be some options for Illinois down the road. But excellent question. Thank you.
This is Gia. I'm sorry.
You go for it, Gia.
And in just to give a few more specifics just about states, from our research, 10 states and the District of Columbia already have supported decision-making statutes in place. That includes for those who are a lot like Teresa and I, we're research and data gurus, or not gurus, but I guess nerds is the terminology, but we love it. Wisconsin, Missouri, Texas, and Delaware. There are multiple other states that have related pilot projects and task forces convened or pre-COVID-19 convened to discuss this topic. For foreign countries as diverse as Israel, Canada, Australia, and Croatia have adopted this model as well, and it is recognized by the United Nations. Lastly, I just want to, for those who are very well versed in Illinois law, I want to point out that the existing Illinois Probate Act already includes language consistent with the concept of supported decision making, including the requirement that guardians are to make decisions that maximize an individual's self-reliance and independence. This simply puts more legs to the body to give some more clarifying language and guidance for those persons who are looking for something least restrictive for persons that have that range of decisional capacity and could benefit based on their level of ability from having a supported decision-making agreement.
Thank you so
Gia.
much. That's really helpful context. And as far as I'm concerned, anytime we can include more guidance, more guiding principles, more information about least restrictive environments in statute, we should do that. Just because it seems like sometimes the human way is to deviate to the other side of things, which of course is how we have done things historically. Historically, it has not been about the least restrictive. It's been about the most restrictive. We had a question that came in from Nancy, and Nancy is asking if there's any online petitions to send to our legislators or talking points. And that's a really, really great question. We're going to create that. So I'll say a few things, and I know that Cindy will want to weigh in. As a legislator, this is really important. And I notice when people send emails and when I'm getting a lot of emails on the same bill or the same issue, I really pay attention. And sometimes I get petitions, which are important and I pay attention to. And sometimes I get emails where people are really putting how they feel into their own words and talking from their own personal experience, and that's very powerful. So what we've put in the chat here is the link to the bill on the Illinois General Assembly website, and the important part here that a legislator will need to know is what is the bill number. So if you click that link, you'll see what the bill number is. And for starters, just communicating to any member of the General Assembly and saying, you support this bill, you could include this link and why, that can only help. In terms of a more formal advocacy and specific talking points, I'm gonna let Cindy weigh in because I see that in our future, and her role as the president of the LSC is really key.
Thank you. In the past, when there was a very important bill, notably the elected representative school board bill here in Illinois, we organized fax campaigns with our families. So we had to ask everybody what their address was, and that's how we were able to find out their state representative and state senator. And we had people signing off on a letter asking and urging their representative to support a bill. And we will also do the same thing with our students, with our families rather, when we can get them to do that. We can also encourage them to send emails, as you've said. You know, the stories are what resonate with people, and everybody has a story to tell, and your own authentic story is something that can really impact the legislators. So thank you.
And if I could add too, we've had some success in the past with individuals filing witness slips when at a certain stage in the process, and you know, family members, anyone can go in and register a witness slip. It doesn't mean you have to testify. You can just acknowledge support of the bill in the process. And you know, the committees that hear these bills look at those numbers and see how many people are supporting it, how many people aren't supporting. So that's an opportunity, and it's a very simple process. It takes a while to figure out how to get it into the system, but once that opens up, you know, there you can get a link and share it out with folks and ask them to consider to file a witness slip in support of the bill.
That's a great point. I'll just share a little context of where we are in the legislative year, because a lot of people don't know this. So in normal times, we would have spent, we being me and my colleagues in the General Assembly, we would have spent from about mid-January 2021 till the end of May, 2020, this year in Springfield in a 5-month session where we're there Tuesday through Thursday, working on a whole lot of bills, and the deadline to get a lot of things done is the end of May. Because of COVID, we weren't able to do that this year. We did go to Springfield for just a 4-day session at the end of May where we had a very narrow agenda. So when we look at our legislative calendar and the next time we're slated to be in Springfield, it's actually for 6 days starting on November 17th. And that's something called a veto session, where we also have a pretty narrow agenda, in part because it's only 6 days. So I share that with everyone who's interested in this bill, because realistically speaking, we will be getting back to truly working on this bill in terms of moving it through the legislative process in the spring of 2021. And that'll be a critical time for legislators all across the state to hear from their constituents. So we have a lot of good runway to build a plan. In the meantime, and this is, I'm trying to see the positive of putting things on pause because of the virus, this is an excellent time for Gia and Teresa and myself to hear from people most impacted by this legislation on what they think about it and what ideas for changes they might have. So if you look at the link that we put in the chat from the ILGA website, that's a link to the actual bill. that is the bill number that you would send to your legislator, and you can actually click the link to the 13-page bill and take a look and truly share your thoughts with me and Gia and Teresa.
Just to add to that, in my role as Director of Legislative Affairs, I want to also indicate this is also the great time to hear from opponents. Our agency is extremely transparent about the work that we do. We're extremely transparent about being sure that folks are included in the process. We do our due diligence explicitly with trying to reach out to every portion of the state. That's very important to us. And so not hearing from people that oppose sometimes can throw, and I understand that sometimes that is part of the strategy, but sometimes it throws a monkey wrench in something that can be so great for so many people. And I think sometimes opponents aren't looking necessarily to derail a bill in full, but are looking at a certain portion. So if you have, as both Representative LaPointe and Deputy Director Parks has indicated, if you have something that you would like to see after you read the very short 13 pages, of which the guidance document is at the end, please reach out to us so that we can have fruitful conversations and build fiduciary relationships as it relates to our agency and the work that we do. Thank you.
All right, we are scanning to see if any other questions came in. Let's see. Well, I'm going to put a question out there, and that is, in the conversations so far about this bill and any changes made, can you give us a specific example of feedback that a group provided and a change that you looked at?
Yeah. Some of it is just kind of fleshing out the language a little bit, and we noticed, and it was brought to our attention, even though it was our intent that this be for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we did not specifically state that in the bill. So cleaning up the language a little bit, that was one potential change that we needed to clarify. There was also the question of one of the disqualifiers is, having a history of abuse or neglect for the supporter, that should disqualify them. But there's a condition in it that there must be a court finding of abuse or neglect. That's a little too stringent. We feel like, any kind of abuse or neglect finding should be relevant and be a disqualifier for a supporter. So we're going to clean up that language a little bit and make that clear. There was also a question about compensation for a supporter, and we felt that after we had some back and forth with one stakeholder, that we should put in a provision that supporters not be paid. They don't receive compensation. We don't want to see businesses starting up around the concept of supported decision making and a private entity come in and start being supporters for people with disabilities. So also education, that we needed to include an educational component, and it would probably be our agency, much like we have the guardianship training module on our website. We would have something available for supporters as well, so that they would have education on their role and their responsibility. I think those were some of the key changes we've heard so far, but we're certainly open to more feedback, and we're waiting to hear back from some of the stakeholders. But this is an open page at this point in time. So we would love to hear from anybody regarding suggestions, concerns, even language, verbiage changes that you might recommend.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Teresa. Well, we will wrap up. We're a little bit past 12, and just to refresh and highlight where some of the resources are going to be stored, we're going to make sure that in short order, this whole event makes it onto my government website, which is replapointe.com. And we will also include a direct link to that 13-page bill, the fact sheet, and this very valuable website that we put the link in the chat on supported decision making overall, chock full of resources about what is happening around the country. So we'll get that up. And I'm going to end with a little bit of a story, and then I'll just see if any of the panelists want to chime in before we close it out. So I can't stress enough how your legislators would love to hear from you, and seeing them and sharing your own experience in person is just so incredibly valuable. And I will share that when I went to meet with the local school council at Vaughn, and Principal McNally was with me in the room, and Cindy as president was in there, I was sharing some information about a few bills related to young people with developmental disabilities, including this supported decision-making bill. And it had come to me very recently. And then another bill that's pending in the General Assembly that I don't have the bill number off the top of my head, but it's a bill that would make it so young people in high schools for kids with disabilities don't have to leave right on their 22nd birthday. They could stay to the end of the year. When I shared these concepts with the local school council sitting at Vaughn, I immediately saw all the eyes of the parents light up. And that sounds like a small moment, but for me, I'm never going to forget that. Every time I'm working on these bills, I'm going to be thinking about just that visceral reaction I saw from parents. And it just immediately told me how important these things are and how these bills can really be life-changing for parents, young people, and families. So that's the inspiration I carry around with me. And I thank Cindy and Principal McNally for inviting me into that room. Does anyone else want to say anything while we close it out?
I would just add, I echo your concern on that particular bill as well, because, you know, my son left school mid-year because he turned 22. So he didn't get to finish out a school year. And regardless, there are just so many things out there that really require legislation to get them in place and to get them to be a firm resource of advocacy for our kids. So I applaud Representative LaPointe for being a resource to families who have children with disabilities. It's really an important role in Illinois to have those kinds of resources at play. So thank you very much.
And for anybody that's interested in the bill that Representative LaPointe, the second one that she just brought up, that's by my representative, which is Fran Hurley, and that is House Bill 3897.
Excellent. I know a bunch of us are really looking forward to working on that in Springfield and to engaging parents, families, young people in the process.
I want to say something very quickly, and that is Representative LaPointe. I think your journey in serving many different people, being a social worker, helping people with autism, it has shaped in large part who you are today. And I really think that you're an excellent example of what any kind of legislator should be in that you're going out into the community and actively searching and supporting people rather than many other legislators who are, of course, busy and wait for the people to come to them. So I am very grateful to you for your passion and your focus. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy. That's really, really kind of you. And this is the way elected officials could be, should be. And believe me, there's a whole bunch of us that do this, and we need to do more of it. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. It's Thursday. Have a good rest of the week. Stay cool. And we'll get to the weekend soon. I know this is a really hard and critical time for families with kids in school, given the virus and figuring out how we're going to get things done. So I'm putting out strength and support out there to families. Bye.